Picture yourself walking through the beating heart of ancient Rome. The year is 67 AD. The sun glints off marble columns, the air hums with gossip, and the stone streets echo with the sandals of senators and slaves alike. Then all sound seems to vanish as he appears. The emperor, Nero. Wrapped in golden shadow, he strolls through the forum, and beside him walks a stunning woman clad in silks and sapphires. Her presence is magnetic, her beauty otherworldly. But the eyes of Rome do not admire, they tremble, because everyone knows the truth. That woman, she's no woman at all, she is a boy. His name is Sporus, and his story is one of the most harrowing accounts of manipulation, obsession, and cruelty ever carved into the stone of history. It is not just a tale of perversion, it is a story of a child erased of identity, stolen and replaced with a lie, a mirror, a ghost, a living doll. Before Sporus became the emperor's most disturbing fantasy, he was likely born into the imperial household as a slave. The exact details of his early life are lost, no letters, no family, no dreams left behind. All we know is that he was young, perhaps only 14 or 15 when Nero first noticed him. What drew the emperor's gaze wasn't the boy's intellect or wit, it was his face. Sporus bore an eerie resemblance to someone Nero had loved more than anyone in his life, the Empress Poppaea Sabina. She had died violently, possibly at Nero's own hand, and the guilt twisted itself into delusion. And then fate delivered Sporus the echo of a woman long gone, carved into the flesh of a child. Poppaea Sabina had been more than just Nero's wife. She was his obsession. Beautiful, cunning, and politically savvy, she had replaced Nero's first wife Octavia, an arranged loveless union. Poppaea was everything Octavia wasn't: ambitious, magnetic, and unafraid to use her allure to influence the emperor. But she also had the fatal flaw of being honest. One night in 65 AD, heavily pregnant with Nero's child, Poppaea dared to criticize the emperor, accusing him of caring more about applause than empire. In a fit of rage, Nero kicked or struck her so brutally that she died from her injuries, taking their unborn child with her. The aftermath was madness. He refused to burn her body, instead embalming it, entombing it like a goddess and speaking to it daily. He built her a cult, commissioned her statues, forced the court to pretend she was still alive. Grief did not humble Nero. It unhinged him. When Nero saw Sporus, delicate, soft-eyed, ethereal, something snapped into place. Here was his solution, his redemption, his resurrection. The emperor didn't simply dress the boy in silks. He ordered his body changed. Physicians were summoned. Surgery was performed, a crude, barbaric castration that likely left Sporus screaming, bleeding, and permanently altered. This was no gender transition. It was an act of control, of mutilation, of reducing a living soul to a symbol. Afterwards, Sporus was renamed Sabina, given Poppaea's jewels, her gowns, her scent. And then Nero announced their marriage. A public wedding, a grand imperial spectacle. A dead woman's face, a boy's body, a tyrant's grief. From that moment on, Sporus lived not as a person, but as a reflection, a shadow of someone else. He sat beside Nero at banquets, walked with him through the streets, was presented to foreign dignitaries as empress. He had no room to breathe, no space to grieve the loss of himself. Every day was a theater of performance, the voice, the posture, the smile, all rehearsed. Every mistake could mean punishment. Every failure to reflect Poppaea perfectly was a threat. To survive, Sporus became a master of imitation. But imitation is not living. Inside, something was dying. Perhaps the boy he once was. Perhaps the will to dream. In 68 AD, the empire turned against Nero. Provinces revolted, generals marched. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state. The Praetorian Guard, once protectors, abandoned him. As Nero fled with his closest followers, Sporus was with him, the emperor's last illusion. In a villa outside Rome, Nero prepared for death. As his enemies closed in, he asked Sporus to help him die, to assist in his suicide. In the end, it was a freedman who delivered the blow. Nero's final words, "What an artist dies in me." Sporus lived, but his nightmare was far from over. Without Nero, Sporus became a pawn, an eerie trophy of imperial madness. He was passed between powerful men, Nymphidius Sabinus, Otho Vitellius, each treating him not as a person but as property. Some called him Sabina. Others paraded him at parties, laughing at the grotesque parody of femininity forced upon him. Under Vitellius Sporus was scheduled to appear in the Colosseum reenacting a myth that ended in his public rape and death. Rather than endure it, Sporus made one final choice, the first truly his in years. He took his own life. What makes Sporus' story so haunting isn't just the violence or the cruelty, it's the complete erasure. From the moment Nero saw his face, Sporus stopped being himself. He became a ghost of someone else, a canvas for the delusions of a god emperor. We don't know his real thoughts. His voice is gone. His story comes to us through those who used him, mocked him, rewrote him. But we know this in the end, when faced with the ultimate humiliation, Sporus chose to die on his own terms. That act, though tragic, was also defiant. In that moment, he was no longer Nero's doll. He was a human being reclaiming the one thing left his agency. Sporus is not just a strange footnote in Roman history. He is a symbol of what happens when power goes unchecked, when grief becomes tyranny, when love turns into possession. He reminds us that beneath every tale of emperors and empires are lives crushed beneath the wheels of history, boys who never had a chance to grow up, dreams that were never allowed to blossom. The boy who became a bride, the child who was forced to wear a mask until he could no longer bear his reflection. Remember his name, not because he was Nero's ghost, but because even in silence, he reminds us what it means to be human. History has a way of preserving names that conquer and destroy, names etched into marble, celebrated in temples, spoken in awe. But sometimes the names that matter most are the ones spoken in pain, whispered in memory. Names like Sporus. He was not a general, not a philosopher, not a hero in the traditional sense. He was a boy, young, vulnerable, perhaps even hopeful once. And yet, through no fault of his own, he became a symbol of what happens when innocence is devoured by obsession, when power unchecked crosses the threshold from governance into godhood. What Nero did to Sporus was not just an act of abuse. It was a declaration that one man's grief could override another's humanity. That desire could rewrite identity. That love, when twisted by power, can become indistinguishable from cruelty. In Sporus, we see the terrifying potential of empire to consume individuals and repurpose them as objects, as ideas, as ghosts. And yet in that final quiet decision to take his own life, rather than be paraded before a howling crowd, Sporus gave us something else. Not a lesson in surrender, but in resistance, the kind that doesn't roar but whispers, the kind that reclaims dignity when all else is stripped away. Sporus reminds us that resilience does not always look like rebellion. Sometimes it looks like survival. Sometimes like a soft voice refusing to echo what it's told. And sometimes it looks like the courage to end the story on your own terms. He may not have left behind writings, speeches, or monuments, but he left behind a haunting question. How many lives have been erased because they didn't fit the shape that power demanded of them? 2,000 years later, we still don't know what Sporus dreamed of, what made him laugh, who he loved, what he might have become. But we do know this: he was more than Nero's living doll. He was a soul. And now, through remembering, we return to him what was taken, his humanity. So if you carry anything from this story, let it be this. History is not only made by emperors, it is made in the silence of those who endured them, in the stories they never got to tell, in the dignity they were denied but which in death can be restored. Remember Sporus, not as a curiosity, but as a warning, as a voice, as a life. And let that remembrance echo, because sometimes the most powerful legacy is simply to be remembered as real.